Hi everyone, I'm Stacy Newman alongside Executive Chef Scott Savage and Pastry Chef Jeremy Garcia.
Hello.
And today we are discussing kind of a staple on most American menus, and that's pizza.
Yes, it's one of my favorites. I love it. And actually today I'm bringing Jeremy in on this because Jeremy is the one who has created our pizza crust here. And I'm forcing you to get out there and get your name out there. This is a ploy for me too. Jeremy, why don't you take it away? What do you got going on here today?
Okay, so this is a pretty simple pizza crust. It's really easy to do at home. You don't need a whole lot of crazy stuff. What we've got is about 2.5 cups of cold water. I like to use cold water for the doughs to let it ferment overnight in your fridge, and then the next day you can roll it out and then worry about letting it rise and all that jazz later on. So we've got a little 2.5 cups of cold water here. We got about 1/4 cup plus a couple tablespoons of olive oil, a tablespoon of salt, a little bit of instant yeast. There's a couple types of yeast you can get at the store. Most stores are going to have active dry. We use instant yeast here. The recipe online will have the conversions for what you need. And then we've got about 2 pounds of flour. So to start out to make the dough, I like to put the liquid ingredients in first. So if you want to go ahead and pour the water and the oil in there. And then we'll add all our dry ingredients afterwards.
So the yeast does go in last. You don't have to really do anything with that?
Yeah, you don't have to worry about mixing it in. The great thing about this yeast is when it gets mixed in with the flour and you let it sit overnight, it's going to activate as it sits, and it's going to ferment and give you this great flavor that's really important. So this is something you kind of want to do ahead of time.
The main thing for this is another cheap way. This is what we're really trying to get across here. Great pizza dough, make a nice fresh pizza at home, save yourself a lot of money. I mean, the money that you have involved in this is very minimal.
Very, very minimal.
And we're going to put the yeast in.
Go
so
ahead and add the yeast.
I've heard that you don't want it to touch the wet ingredients. Does that really matter?
For some doughs, you don't want. With this one though, because we're just all mixing it together, the great thing about it, if you give it enough time, that yeast is going to activate on its own. And because we're making it cold, it's going to get evenly distributed throughout the dough, and it's not going to activate too much until the next day when we roll it out and then let the heat cause it to rise. And that's where we're going to get that nice fluffy crust. So to lower this is a little tricky here. But what we're going to do is basically knead this dough for about 8 minutes, and then we can portion out and roll it out.
All right. How fast?
Medium speed is perfect.
So we've had a chance for this to go for about 8 minutes now, and it's time to take it out.
Yes, it is.
All right.
Okay, so now this dough is sticky, so your hands are going to get kind of covered in dough when you do this.
Part of the fun.
But yeah, it's part of the fun. So what we want to do is portion it out, because this actually makes enough dough for about 5 pizzas.
And you're flouring your board?
Yep.
So basically, we're like I said, we can put these in the freezer.
Yeah.
Or
So what we'll do is we're just going to portion this out. Steal your knife there.
of course.
And if you've got a scale, you can weigh them out. They're going to be about between 11 and 12 ounces. But we're just going to eyeball these here into about 5 pieces.
Those don't look quite even to me. But.
Hey, you know, if one's a little bit bigger, you can just move some of this over there. And then what you're going to do is just kind of gather these balls of dough up, and then you're going to let them sit overnight in the fridge. So just get like a pan that you can spray with a little bit of oil, wrap them up, cover them up, throw them in the fridge, let them rest, and then the next day we can pull one out, and that's when we're going to roll that out, and then we can par bake them.
Now, if you were going to keep any of these for use maybe later, would you freeze them after that process, or could you go ahead and stick one of them in the freezer now?
The easiest way to do it would be to go ahead, let them all rise together, and then par bake them all together at the same time. And then once you let those crusts cool, then you can just individually wrap those crusts, store those in the freezer. So next time you want a pizza, you can pop one of those out, cover it up, and you're ready to go.
Okay.
And then the great thing about this is it's cheap, because the cost of buying like 5 par baked crusts at the store is going to be about $15, $20, because they're anywhere between $3 and $4 a crust. Whereas with this, we've got 2 pounds of flour in here, plus a couple other ingredients. So we're at maybe like $4 here. So
At the most,
yeah.
probably.
So these are sitting in the fridge overnight. You take it out the next morning, and you're going to roll it out.
Yeah, and so what you want to do is, if you don't have a nice pizza pan like we do, you can use really any kind of pan you want. You just want to spray the bottom of the pan so it doesn't stick. You can just use any kind of just regular pan spray, canola or vegetable spray. If you don't have any of that, you can just take a brush with some oil, spread that on there. If you don't have a brush, just spread it on with your hand. It's pretty easy to do. And then you're going to take your pizza crust, go ahead and roll it out by hand so it's slightly circular, and then lightly flour it. You don't want to use too much flour, because the more flour you use, the drier it's going to end up being. And so we want to keep some of the stickiness of that dough because that extra moisture in there is going to translate into your final pizza.
So talk a little bit about the par baking.
Yeah, okay, so if you've got a pizza stone at home or a deck oven with a bottom on it that's really, really hot, like at most pizza shops, you don't have to worry about par baking because what's going to happen is when you top this raw dough and throw it in the oven, that stone on the bottom is going to cook the crust all the way through as well as the rest of the oven cooking the top. Most people's ovens aren't that hot or they don't have a stone. So a quick, easy way to get around that is just to bake your pizza crust about halfway by itself. And then when you top it with the rest of the toppings and throw it in the oven, it's going to finish baking about the same time as your ingredients finish baking on top of the pizza.
So you've got it rolled out. We're talking about baking it part way, how long, and how hot.
Okay, so you're going to want to go about 375 if you're using an oven at home, and it's going to be about 4 to 5 minutes. You don't want to get a whole lot of color in there. If it starts getting really golden brown on top, it's probably gone a little too long. So it's going to look kind of pale, but it's going to be nice and fluffy if you let it rise. And then you pull it out, let it cool, and you're ready to go.
So an economical way to start one of everybody's favorites, pizza dough. And next week, we're going to pick out our favorite toppings and top this.
That's right.